This is to be continued. Now with us to speak more about everything Netanyahu has on his plate these days is journalist and JNS Jerusalem bureau chief Alex Trayman. Alex, these are certainly very challenging times for Prime Minister Netanyahu. Now, let's start with security. A shell fired from Gaza and Israeli response targeting terrorist site. Israelis on the border back in shelters. Is there any change in this other than the usual tit for tat?
Well, we've seen these types of volleys launched at Israeli cities, oftentimes over the last several years, and almost a year cannot go by without some kind of a conflict. I think perhaps that some of this was fired in timing coordination with Antony Blinken's visit to the region. While Blinken is pushing for calm in the region, there are Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza that do seek to really instigate conflict. So, I don't necessarily think that this is out of the ordinary. And until the Israeli government and the IDF will forcibly change the situation on the ground in Gaza, we can continue to expect rocket salvos from time to time.
Now, on the diplomatic front, Netanyahu just held strategic talks with visiting Secretary of State Blinken and now off to Paris to meet President Macron. Is coordination of Iran topping Netanyahu's agenda? What else needs to be discussed with Macron there now in Paris?
I think absolutely Iran is the number one issue that Netanyahu wants to deal with. And, we just saw reports even this week that France struck against Iranian weapons that had been transferred towards Houthis in Yemen. And you have to wonder if some of those strikes were affected with Israeli intelligence. I think that even Blinken's trip to Israel, even though there was talk about the Palestinian issue and talk about judicial reform, I think that visit by Blinken to Jerusalem really focused primarily on the Iranian issue. And I don't really think that Netanyahu would have rushed so quickly off to Paris on just a few days' notice if there weren't significant talks dealing with the Iranian issue.
Can you tell us what else is on the agenda there now in Paris in his visit?
Well, he's going also to visit with the Jewish community leaders there, and I think that they're staying over Shabbat as well. But I definitely think that diplomacy and intelligence sharing and dealing with Iran is primary to Netanyahu's visit. He's certainly hopeful to convince Macron, who does have some sway in the international community, not to allow the West to re-enter talks into a new JCPOA agreement.
Now, turning to domestic issues, Israel's Attorney General Gadi Barav-Miara today warned Netanyahu not to interfere in the judicial reform due to a conflict of interest because of his ongoing trial. How much of a problem is this for him, for Netanyahu?
Well, I think that we have a brewing constitutional crisis here in Israel where the departments of the judicial pillar of the government are really going to do everything that they can. First, they did everything that they can to prevent Netanyahu from becoming the prime minister to begin with. And now they're going to do everything that they can to protect the status quo with regard to the way the judiciary works. And so the idea was that the attorney general could prevent Netanyahu from advancing judicial reforms on the basis of the fact that he's currently under trial, even though the reforms themselves have nothing to do with Netanyahu's trial. The way that Supreme Court justices are selected has nothing to do with Netanyahu's ongoing cases, and even the raised the idea of an override clause in the Knesset really has nothing to do with Netanyahu's trial. And so Justice Minister Yariv Levin and also the head of the Constitutional Committee in the Knesset, Simcha Rothman, have both fired back at the Attorney General, saying that it's actually the Attorney General that has a conflict of interest here in preventing the government from advancing legal reforms, because those legal reforms would in fact divide up the position of the Attorney General into three separate positions.
And now, Alex, there have been mass protests and warnings of economic consequences from a range of leading officials and experts cautioning against this judicial overhaul. Netanyahu does understand economics. Are the naysayers having an impact here?
Well, we have to see over time. I don't think that they will. I mean, really, the Israeli startup economy continues to boom. And I don't understand why legal reform would have any connection to whether or not Israel continues to be an incubator for winning technologies. And I think that the danger that's happening here is that Israel's been fighting against BDS activities where the international community has been effectively trying to convince companies to boycott, divest, and sanction the state of Israel. And for those now that are turning around and saying that if Netanyahu will enact judicial reform, that gives an excuse to companies to divest from Israel. In fact, what they're doing is actually promoting BDS, and it's very dangerous.
Alex Traiman, it is very dangerous. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.